On my son Lucas Edwards' birthday, he had only one wish, for us, his family, to go to Disneyland. However, things became difficult because my husband, Alexander Edwards, never cared for me or our son. The most infuriating part was that I had to beg him endlessly before he finally agreed. The night before we were supposed to go to the happiest place on earth, Alexander was nowhere to be found. And right then, Lucas died with his wish unfulfilled. I don't know how I managed it all, but I found myself handing the funeral alone, only to discover a photo of my husband on Cassandra Collins's Instagram post. Elle told him Elle wanted to see the snow, and he did everything for me to see it. Even after seeing that, Elle maintained my composure, but at that moment, Elle made my decision. Elle packed my belongings without shedding a tear. Who would have thought that after everything Alexander would beg me not to go? Chapter 1. It wasn't surprising that Alexander would drop everything for Cassandra. Lad never been his priority, never the exception. To him, was just someone desperate for his attention, a notion he never let go of. How could Elle possibly compare to the woman he always loved? That day, Elle returned from the cemetery to our villa, the place that was supposed to be our Marita home. Yet, Alexander rarely set foot here. LT was more of a shared residence with my son. Lucas, the echoes of Lucas's laughter, his tiny footprints, and the remnants of his toys were everywhere. Each memory of my son was a dagger to my heart, and I wept bitterly as I began clearing away the traces of our life together. Every remembrance of Lucas and me had to go, or I would drown in my grief. As I dragged my suitcase downstairs, I ran into Alexander. He was carrying Cassandra into the house, his face etched with concern. He brushed past me, treating me like a stranger under the same roof. His eyes never even glanced my way. I had grown accustomed to this. With Cassandra around, I was invisible to him. Upon seeing the suitcase at my feet, Alexander stopped in his tracks. His voice was devoid of emotion. "Natalie Collins, another one of your dramatic stunts?" Meanwhile, Cassandra, clinging affectionately to Alexander's neck, looked up at me with a smirk. "Natalie, I twisted my ankle, and since Alexander said it's close by, he brought me here to take care of it. You don't mind, do you? It was just a twisted ankle." I watched as Alexander gently settled her on the sofa and then fetched an ice pack to soothe her foot. He treated her as if she were made of glass. I remember a time when I had a car accident and broke my leg. I needed a family member's signature for surgery, so I reached out to Alexander. His response was cold and detached. "A broken leg isn't life or death. Why bother me?" It felt like a cruel joke, especially when I recalled how he had dismissed me in my time of real need. Yet, it seemed like my husband couldn't be bothered to tend after his wife. Why would he? When everything was just a deal for him. We were just in this marriage to appease our parents. We were just here to get our inheritance. Chapter 2. Alexander, surprisingly, didn't want me to leave. As the CEO of both Gourmet Ventures International, their family company, and Prestige Hotels and Resorts, my family's legacy, he had a reputation to uphold. He assumed leadership roles in our companies, claiming it was his duty as the man. But why should I stay in this sham of a marriage? We had the grandest wedding imaginable, yet he refused to register the papers to make our marriage legal. From that moment on, the presence and absence of love were glaringly apparent. "Alexander, look," I finally said, summoning the strength to confront him. "You have the inheritance already. You're successful. What more do you want from me? I'm giving you your freedom back." Standing in the same room with him made me feel physically ill. He seemed to think my actions were just a ploy to gain his attention. Alexander, without even looking up, scoffed. "What now? Changing your tactics? You can't threaten me with your son, so now you're using yourself as leverage." A year ago, our son Lucas was diagnosed with brain cancer. He'd received countless critical illness notices since then. I recalled how desperately Lucas had called out for a glimpse of his father, but Alexander never visited him. He thought I was using Lucas to gain sympathy and manipulate him. After almost a decade of shared life, this was how little he thought of me. I wiped away my tears. "Think what you want. I'm leaving." I began to leave with my luggage when Cassandra interjected. "Alexander, I heard you planned to take Lucas to Disneyland. You didn't cancel that for the mountain trip with me, did you? Natalie is upset. Alexander replied soothingly, "Don't worry, there are priorities. We can go to Disneyland anytime, but once the snow melts, we won't be able to see it like this." Hearing this, I scoffed coldly. Ignoring them, I dragged my suitcase out. Alexander seemed to sense something was off. He rushed forward and grabbed my hand, his voice laced with frustration. "It's the middle of the night, and you insist on leaving?" He saw my swollen eyes and paused. Is missing a trip to Disneyland really worth crying over like this? My eyes must have been crying themselves raw, for I saw a hint of pity in his gaze. "Let me clear my schedule next month, and I'll take Lucas then, okay?" Next month? What next month did Lucas have? If only he cared a bit more about our son, he wouldn't say such foolish things. I pulled my hand away. No need. Alexander stared at his empty palm, momentarily stunned. He never expected the person who used to cling to him would now avoid him like the plague. Snapping back to reality, he tried to catch up, but Cassandra grabbed his arm. "Alexander, it's all my fault. Even though I knew Lucas was faking his illness, I shouldn't have competed with a child for your attention. Now it's made Natalie angry at me." Faking illness? My mind went blank. By the time I snapped back to reality, I had already slapped Cassandra across the face. Chapter 3. Alexander's face, initially tinged with guilt, shifted instantly. He positioned Cassandra protectively behind him and eyed me warily. "Natalie, what are you doing? She's your sister." I glared at Cassandra. "You'd better watch your mouth." However, Cassandra, looking hurt, pleaded, "Alexander, don't let me come between you two. If my sister won't admit that Lucas is faking his illness, I'll just drop it." Upon hearing that, my brow furrowed as I turned to Alexander. "You think Lucas is faking it too?" But he just remained silent. Looking around, he noticed Lucas was nowhere to be seen. With a calm tone, Alexander asked, "Where did you take him this time?" Of course, he clearly didn't believe me. If only he would come home, he'd see the table covered in medications and medical records. Yet he never did. I remember when Lucas knew he didn't have much time left. He wanted one last family trip to Disneyland. Just to make my son happy, I had begged Alexander, even going so far as to kneel before him. In the end, I clung to his pants, promising that this would be the last time I would ever bother him. I was willing to set him free. At that moment, he looked down at me, slightly stunned. His eyes filled with both joy and complexity. "You mean that?" "Yes," I murmured, closing my eyes as tears streamed down. God knew how much I loathed him since then. If only I could undo what I did in the past, our families would never have arranged a marriage between us. Years ago, I found him in the streets near my ballet class. Little did I know he was being chased by his kidnappers. Since then, the Edwards family owed us because I saved the life of their heir. My family, the Collins family, and the Edwards family became friends. We always had shared dinners and celebrations. We even merged our subsidiary companies. It came to the point where we always saw each other. Yet it seemed like Alexander didn't clearly remember the day he was kidnapped because he was just a kid and probably traumatized. Until now, he believed that Cassandra was his savior. I was hurt because no matter how hard I tried to tell him that was not the case, he would never believe me. "Stop it. Cassie saved me. You're so damn annoying." I can still remember his words to this day. I loved him, even though we were teenagers back then. That was why I tried to gain even a little bit of his attention, but even before, his eyes were always set on Cassandra. From being his savior, he had grown to like my sister too. And that was probably why, when our parents set us up in a marriage, he was so angry. "This is bullshit. They won't give us our inheritance? The company is supposed to be mine." He was so angry that he pushed everything off his desk. His eyes drifted to me. "And you didn't even bother to say no. You know I didn't have a say in this either, right?" I tried to defend myself. But since then, he hated me even more. I thought he would like me somehow because we were always together, but that was just wishful thinking. Until one day, he told me his plan to fool our parents. "Fine. Let's attend that damn wedding ceremony. We'll fool them that we're married, but we will never register our marriage. I'll just present them fake documents. We would marry each other but never register it. It was as if I was just his wife before the eyes of our parents and the company, but I would never have his heart. Why didn't I think further ahead in the past? Why didn't I tell my parents I would rather die than marry him? Why did I even love this man? Now, even though he was my husband and we had a child, he only ever cared about Cassandra. Damn it. Why wouldn't he spend one last moment with Lucas? It was one thing for him not to love me, but Lucas was his son too. How could he be so heartless towards his own child? Chapter 4. I stared at Alexander with deep disappointment. Once, I had admired his features as if they were a work of art, but now his face only filled me with disgust. All I could feel for him now was nothing but hatred. Just as Alexander was about to speak, my sister cut him off. My foot hurts and so does my face. Could you check if it's swollen? I'm worried it might affect tomorrow's business event. Upon hearing her pitiful voice, Alexander immediately turned his attention to her. Cassandra took advantage of the moment, collapsing into his arms. The slap I had delivered with all my might had left a stark handprint on her pale cheek, and tears were welling up in her eyes. Looking heartbroken, Alexander gently wiped her tears away. I remember how he used to be kind to me when we were younger. Whenever I fell, he would help me up and comfort me in the same gentle manner. After all, we still spent our childhood together. However, now, I couldn't recall the last time he had shown me even a hint of that kindness. His gaze was now icy and devoid of tenderness. Apologize to your sister. I lifted my chin, standing tall. No. Alexander was clearly taken aback by my defiance. He never saw this day coming, did he? He was used to seeing me doing everything for him, even though he was already disrespecting me. I was that stupidly in love, and God knew how much I hated myself for that. During the time he despised me, my feelings for him had only grown. Because I cared for him deeply, I was always cautious around him, trying hard to avoid giving him any reason to dislike me. I offered him my genuine affection, terrified that he might reject me. Despite my best efforts, nothing I did ever seemed to please him. Everything I did always seemed to fall short compared to what Cassandra did. Always Cassandra. Alexander's initial surprise faded, and he returned to the couch, holding my sister close. As I began to walk away, I heard his warning. Don't make me angry, Natalie. His bodyguard stopped me and escorted me back in front of them. Damn it. These people were both our men, and yet they were only loyal to him. Now, I regretted giving him all the power in both our families and companies. He even honed them to be a sword pointing at my neck. Alexander sat there, legs crossed, observing me with a detached air. The pressure in the room was palpable. Apologize to Cassandra, he repeated. Cassandra flashed me a challenging smile before turning to my husband. It's okay. Natalie didn't mean it. When she uttered those words, Alexander looked at her with pity. You're too soft-hearted. You treat her well, but she'll never see you as her sister. He then turned a steely glare at me. Anyone who hurts Cassandra will pay double. I recalled a time from elementary school, just a year after I saved him when I had been cornered by older students who stole my money. Alexander had suddenly appeared, fiercely beating up the one who had kicked me. The boy who once protected me was now defending someone else. And now, my defiant attitude had clearly angered him. It seemed like he was intent on teaching me a lesson. He signaled to the bodyguards to force me to kneel before them. I gritted my teeth in anger. I had knelt enough before him already. And now he was forcing me to do these things all for a woman? If only he could put as much effort into our son. As I bowed my head, Alexander's expression softened slightly, as if he took some satisfaction in my submission. A bodyguard stepped forward, raising his hand to strike me. But Cassandra intervened. Alexander, she's still my sister. Men can be too harsh, and I'm worried they might hurt her. Then, after a pause, she continued, If she really needs a lesson, I should be the one to teach it, Cassandra insisted. At that moment, Alexander didn't argue. The next thing I knew, Cassandra raised her hand and slapped me twice, her manicured nails cutting into my cheek. She looked at Alexander with a troubled expression. Oh no, I've hurt Natalie. What should we do? However, Alexander snorted coldly. She deserves it. You're too kind, worrying about her even though she hurt you first. The bodyguard let me go, and I clumsily fell to the ground. Alexander looked down at me with cold disdain. You owe Cassandra an apology. Owe her an apology? It was Cassandra who had first slandered Lucas. No one, not even a single person in the world, should dare to taint my son's image. He was never a liar. Yet, as always, Alexander always took her side no matter what. I scoffed. In your dreams. I hate you, Alexander. Chapter 5. When I looked at Alexander, my eyes held nothing but intense hatred. The sight made him furrow his brow in confusion. Natalie, just do as you're told, and you can have whatever you want. I can accompany your son, or give you the title of my wife. I had once longed for the legitimacy of being his wife. I wanted him to register our marriage, to publicly acknowledge our union. But he had always been seen with Cassandra, never with me. It was almost laughable how hard he tried to keep me by his side because of my position as the heir to prestige hotels and resorts. Yet, everyone in the company knew that Cassandra was poised to take my place. Alexander's preference for her over me was clear to all. Whenever I visited the company, I was barely acknowledged. Despite being the rightful CEO, my presence was overshadowed by Alexander's. He handled the work, leaving me sidelined. I had once been recognized for my leadership skills and entrepreneurial acumen. But back then, I could not use my skills because of my absence in the company, and it was because of my focus on caring for Lucas. I didn't regret prioritizing my son's health, but I regretted relinquishing my role at the company. Now, Alexander was using his position to coerce and lure me back into submission. He even tried to bargain using this sham of a marriage. It was absurd. I braced against the pain on my face and met his gaze firmly. No need, Alexander. As I said earlier, we're done. Perhaps because I had loved him so intensely before, he couldn't believe I was serious about leaving. He sneered. What? Are you trying to get my attention now? You think leaving will make me come running? Or are you just pretending that Lucas needs me to play with him again? I could hear the scorn in his voice, but before I could respond, Cassandra jumped in. Natalie, stop deceiving Alexander. If Lucas were really dying, why would you be here alone? That was the last straw. Shut up. You have no right to mention Lucas. Upon hearing how my voice rose, Cassandra flinched, hurt. Okay, I won't mention him then. Please, Natalie, don't be angry with me. Seeing how my hostile attitude towards Cassandra had provoked Alexander, he chuckled coldly. He pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant, Dylan Carter. To ensure I heard every word, he put the call on speaker. Dylan, find out which hospital Natalie's son is at. Stop his treatment immediately. His expression was one of calculated malice, as if this move would somehow give him power over me. I managed a weary smile, resigned to the cruel game he was playing. Minutes later, Dylan's voice came through, hesitant and grim. Mr. Edwards, I have bad news. Lucas passed away the day after you went to the mountains with Miss Cassandra. Chapter 6. Alexander's disbelief was palpable as he stared at me. How is that possible? He dismissed the idea with a scoff. Dylan, you've grown bold, conspiring with Natalie to deceive me. The line went silent for a moment. After Alexander ended the call, Dylan sent over details about the funeral arrangements and the cemetery address. When Alexander read the message, he froze, his eyes widening with shock. Why? Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice trembling. I let out a humorless chuckle. How could I tell you? The night before our trip to Disneyland, he had turned off his phone and vanished. He didn't notify anyone, neither our parents, who had long since retired abroad, nor the company. And certainly not me. I searched everywhere for him in vain. Desperate, I had reached out to Dylan to find my husband's whereabouts. With his help, I managed to arrange Lucas's funeral. Alexander's face twisted in regret as he recalled his actions. If you had told me beforehand, I cut him off sharply. Haven't I told you enough? Every birthday, every Children's Day, every time Lucas was discharged from the ICU, I had reached out to Alexander. Lucas had desperately wanted to see his father. He called him repeatedly, but Alexander brushed off my pleas with excuses, promising to visit soon. Eventually, he stopped answering altogether, too preoccupied with Cassandra and her reality show. Lucas, hooked up to a ventilator, would excitedly point at the TV screen and ask, "Is that Dad?" I would glance at the screen, struggling to tell him the truth. Since birth, Lucas had seen Alexander only a handful of times. He could only barely remember what his father looked like. Yet for Lucas, family was supposed to be me and Alexander. He had met his grandparents only twice years ago. A flicker of guilt crossed Alexander's face. I thought Lucas was using his illness to manipulate me into coming home. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. How could he think so lowly of my son? It shattered me to see him belittle Lucas's suffering. I could tolerate Alexander's scorn towards me, but not towards my child. I remembered reaching out to him when Lucas's symptoms first appeared, only for him to dismiss it as a ploy. The truth was that I had kept the truth from my parents to shield them from worry, thinking I could handle everything myself. Now, I had to face the painful reality of not being able to tell them about their grandson's death. I would tell them eventually, and I would also reclaim my rightful position at prestige hotels and resorts. Now, Alexander's disregard for Lucas's illness was unforgivable. I had enough. If he could destroy our family and dismiss our son's suffering, he could ruin the company too. Alexander's disbelief was evident as he insisted. He was fine the last time I saw him. Last time? I shot back. That was nearly 2 years ago. He had just started walking then. Do you even remember what he looked like? Alexander fell silent, unable to retort. He looked vaguely remorseful, but it was too little, too late. He took a step closer, reaching out to wipe the tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry about this," he murmured, his voice heavy with regret. I swatted his hand away. Sorry? Was that all he had to offer after Lucas's death? My gaze was hard as I searched his face, trying to understand the depth of his feelings. "Oh, please," I said, my voice dripping with icy sarcasm. We could never afford the weight of an apology from Mr. Edwards. Seeing the scorn on my face, Alexander looked unsettled, sensing he might be on the verge of losing me. "Natalie, there's no way to bring him back, but I can make it up to you. If you want to get married for real, we can register our marriage tomorrow." Okay. He actually thought that registering our marriage could compensate for Lucas's death. The absurdity of it was almost comical. "No need, Alexander," I said coldly. "We're done." Chapter 7. Alexander's frustration flared as he glared at me, his voice sharp and filled with disbelief. "Natalie, must you be so stubborn? Isn't this exactly what you've always wanted?" His words struck a chord. It was true. For years, my deepest desire had been to be his legitimate wife. My love for him had driven me to endure humiliation and neglect. I had stayed by his side, accepting my place in the shadows, even as rumors of his relationship with Cassandra swirled around us. My love had become a burden, and I was exhausted. With a heavy heart, I left the mansion, each step weighted by the pain of our broken relationship. Alexander watched me go, his eyes fixed on my retreating figure, a mix of frustration and something else, perhaps regret, flickering in his gaze. I returned to the house that bore my name, a gift from my mother when I completed my master's degree. It was meant to be a sanctuary, but it was now filled with the haunting memories of Lucas. I couldn't accept that he was gone. I shut myself in, overwhelmed by grief, and cried for hours, the weight of my sorrow almost too much to bear. Time lost its meaning. I ate only when hunger struck and slept only when exhaustion took over. Mostly, I was neither hungry nor tired. Eventually, I collapsed from sheer emotional and physical exhaustion. In that dark moment, I wondered if anyone would even notice if I disappeared. To my surprise, it was Alexander who found me. When I awoke, I was met with the sight of him, along with our private nurse, tending to me. He remained silent, his face unreadable. Instead of speaking, he called our family doctor and had Dylan bring my favorite fruit, star apples. The memory of those star apples came flooding back. Whenever I was sick, I would insist on having them. Alexander had always refused at first, but he would eventually bring them to me, and I would cling to him, coaxing him with, "You are the best." His reluctant smile and reddening ears had once made my heart flutter with hope. But now, his gestures felt hollow. I didn't know why he was being so attentive, but I wasn't about to make the same mistake again. I turned away from the fruit, rejecting his offering. Frustrated, he let the spoon clatter noisily against the bowl. "Natalie, look at how thin you've become. Is all this suffering for that man's child really worth it?" His words cut through the silence like a knife. The term, "that man's child," stung deeply. Alexander had been my first and only man. I had never had a boyfriend or a fling before him. I remembered our first night together vividly, how he had returned to the villa drunk, begging me not to leave. We spent that night together, and the next morning, he woke up to find our home had become our new reality. But his gaze had turned to disgust when he saw the marks on my body. "You knew I loved Cassandra, yet you threw yourself at me." Later, when I had Lucas, Alexander's disdain for me was palpable. He accused me of using our child to keep him tied down and even questioned whether Lucas was his. The absurdity of his suspicion made me laugh bitterly. "Then tell me, whose child is he?" I demanded. Enraged, Alexander slammed the bowl onto the table. "You know perfectly well. I don't want to argue about this." He tried to control his anger, his voice strained. "I was wrong about Lucas's illness. Can we just stop fighting? We lost him, but we can have children in the future," he added. "Children? No one can ever replace Lucas." My gaze hardened. "If he's not your child, then whose child is he?" I tried to get answers from him. "Do I need to spell it out?" he snapped. "Who else could it be, if not Grayson Hales?" Grayson Hale? The name was a shock. What did he have to do with this? Grayson and I had grown up together, attending the same business school classes, but we had barely spoken. He was the heir to a rival company, and I had never considered befriending him. "Why would you think I had an affair with him?" I demanded, confusion and anger mingling in my voice. "The day after our wedding, you went to Nirvana Club, didn't you?" Alexander pressed. I remembered that day all too well. His harsh words had driven me to seek solace at a bar. Grayson had been there and had come to my aid when someone harassed me. He had driven me home, a gesture of kindness in a sea of pain. Alexander continued, "Cassandra saw you and him enter a private room and leave together. So, it was Cassandra who had spread those lies." It made sense now. Alexander stepped closer, his grip tightening as he pinned me against the door. "Natalie, it was right after our wedding. You weren't discreet at all. Greedy, wanting it all. And to think I believed I didn't care about what he believed." I pushed him away. "So, you think Lucas isn't your child? Isn't he? Which part of him looks like me?" Alexander's voice was tinged with doubt. I retrieved Lucas's used toothbrush and some hair that had fallen out during his chemotherapy. I handed them to Alexander. "Take these and find out for yourself," I said, my voice weary. Chapter 8 Fury coursed through me like a relentless storm. The realization that Alexander believed me to be a woman so cheap and unprincipled as to seek solace with another man the day after our wedding was unbearable. Anger consumed me, and with it, a fierce determination to reclaim my dignity. My first step was to reach out to my father. I was scared, so scared that I almost didn't dial his number, but after remembering what my son had been through, I pressed the call button. Even though he was thousands of miles away in another country, I needed him now more than ever. I dialed his number, the phone ringing endlessly in my ear, each ring a reminder of my gnawing anxiety. "Hello." My father's voice was rough with sleep, but there was a clear note of concern as he recognized my number. "Dad," I choked out, my voice trembling despite my efforts to remain composed. "I need to talk to you. It's urgent." There was a pause on the other end. "What's wrong, Natalie? You sound upset." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself before launching into the harrowing details of my situation. "It's about Lucas."
He's gone.
He passed away. I heard my father's sharp intake of breath, a sign of his shock and sorrow. What? How did this happen? I recounted the tragic events, the endless hospital visits, and the crushing finality of Lucas's death. The words tumbled out in a torrent, mingled with my anguish. He was so sick, and Alexander, he just couldn't care less. All he cared about was Cassandra. He was never there for us. Not when it mattered. There was a painful silence before my father's voice came back, laced with anger and grief. Alexander, I can't believe he'd do this to you and Lucas. And the fact that your sister is also part of this. I couldn't believe it. And you, what about you? How are you holding up? I swallowed hard, tears streaming down my face. I've been a wreck. But that's not all. Alexander and we never truly loved each other. He thought I was using Lucas to manipulate him, and now he believes our child wasn't even his. It's unbearable. Damn him, my father growled. I'm so sorry you had to go through this. What are you planning to do? A sudden resolve surged through me. I'm going to take charge. I want to lead Prestige Hotels and Resorts. I want to be the CEO, and I want him to know that I'm not backing down. My father's voice softened with a mix of pride and sadness. All right. I'm giving you permission. That's your position after all. I always see you as the rightful heir because your sister liked the entertainment industry better, although she's been trying hard in the company these days. Hearing the unwavering support in his voice gave me the courage I needed. I hung up with a heavy heart, but a determined spirit. I knew what I had to do. I immediately began the process of taking control of Prestige Hotels and Resorts. It wasn't just about reclaiming my rightful place. It was about proving my worth and making Alexander see the consequences of his actions. I didn't care if the employees doubted me at first. I didn't care if they whispered behind my back, wondering why I was there instead of Alexander or Cassandra. Even now, I could almost hear my parents' anguished cries echoing in my mind. They were devastated by the loss of their grandson and furious at Alexander for his negligence. My mother had been beside herself with grief, her tears mingling with my own. The realization that they were grieving not only for Lucas but also for the betrayal of someone they had trusted was almost too much to bear. Who wouldn't be shocked? My family and the Edwards family had been friends, and now that I revealed everything to them, the relationship between our families had been tainted. In the days that followed, I was thrust into the whirlwind of managing the company. I held a meeting with the board of directors, presenting myself as the new CEO. I knew they were skeptical about me, and I knew that Alexander already gained their trust, but I didn't care. I would claim what was mine, and I would make sure that everything he had with Cassandra would fall. This is just the start, I mumbled to myself. I had nothing to lose now. Chapter 9, Natalie. Alexander stormed in, his face a mask of fury, and Cassandra followed closely behind, her expression one of barely contained outrage. Alexander's voice cut through the silence like a blade. I can't believe this, Natalie. You think you can just waltz in here and take over the CEO position? This is ridiculous. You're letting your anger over Lucas's death cloud your judgment. This company is not a toy you can just play with. I stood behind my desk, the weight of my new responsibilities pressing heavily on my shoulders. But I refused to let Alexander's anger intimidate me. I met his gaze with a steely resolve. Me? Just playing? I am serious about this, Alexander. And why the hell are you angry when we both know you just assumed the title because I am your wife in the eyes of many? Let's be real, this is mine from the very start, and I am capable of leading the company. Upon hearing those things, Alexander's jaw tightened. Capable? You've barely been involved in the company. You think you can just step in and fix everything? You're not ready for this. And you, I snapped, have been too busy with your own interests to pay any attention to the company. How many times have you ignored crucial decisions because you were more focused on Cassandra? My sister's entry into the conversation only fueled the fire. She stormed in with an air of superiority, her eyes narrowed. This is absurd, Natalie. You've just arrived and you think you deserve to be CEO? You have no idea what it takes to lead this company. I faced her, unflinching. I have the experience and the skills needed to run this company. And let's not forget, Dad already gave me his blessing. I've always been the one chosen to lead, Cassie. At that moment, Cassandra's face flushed with anger. You're just doing this because you're jealous of me. No one in the company even knows you. But look at me. I have Alexander, and I am the chief financial officer. I have enough experience. The only reason you've been in that position, I retorted, is because you've been playing your own game. You were never the heir Dad intended for this role. I've been preparing for this my entire life. Alexander and Cassandra exchanged a look of disbelief, their shared anger palpable. Something about their burst of anger bothered me. Alexander already had a company he inherited from his family, Gourmet Ventures International, and yet he was so adamant about not letting me work. Cassandra was also not the type to care about these things because she would rather be a model or an actress. Being the CFO was just to have both of us, the daughters of the owners, assume the position. Can't you stop now, Natalie? Alexander said, his voice a low growl. I'm just starting, Alexander. I uttered and smirked, leaving them annoyed. Chapter 10. After Alexander and Cassandra's burst of anger in my office, they didn't show their face to me again. So I continuously worked, trying to ignore the pain of losing my son, trying to act busy, so I could handle it somehow. It was during one of those late-night reviews of financial reports that I noticed something peculiar. I was combing through the quarterly financials, the numbers a blur of red and black, when a small discrepancy caught my eye. It was subtle, a few entries that didn't align with the rest of the data. I leaned closer, my brow furrowing as I tried to make sense of it. Becca, I called out, my voice firm yet calm. My secretary, a woman known for her meticulous nature, stepped into my office with her usual efficiency. Yes, Miss Collins? She inquired, her tone respectful. I need you to run a thorough audit of the financial reports for the past year, I instructed. Something doesn't seem right with the numbers, and I want a detailed analysis of all transactions involving the CFO, Cassandra Collins. Becca's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded immediately. Only she knew Cassie was my sister. She didn't try to voice out her thoughts. Of course. I'll get started on it right away. The next few days were a blur of relentless work. I pored over countless documents, trying to piece together the puzzle that was unfolding before me. As I delved deeper into the reports, patterns began to emerge, transactions that were clearly out of place, money flowing to accounts that had no apparent connection to the company's operations. The numbers painted a troubling picture. Cassandra, my sister, and the CFO was at the center of these irregularities. It wasn't just one or two suspicious transactions. It was an entire web of deceit. Each entry seemed to lead back to her in some way, revealing a troubling trail of financial misconduct. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The realization that she was involved in laundering money through the company was a punch to the gut. Our parents had trusted her with one of the most critical positions in the company, and it was clear now that she had abused that trust for her own gain. Cassandra's actions could have serious consequences not just for the company, but for our entire family. Becca returned with a detailed report, her face a mask of professionalism, though I could sense her unease. Miss Collins, I've compiled the audit results. The irregularities are as you suspected. There are significant discrepancies in the financial records related to Ms. Cassandra's transactions. I took the report from her, feeling the weight of it in my hands. Thank you, Becca. I need you to keep this information confidential for now. We'll decide on the next steps after I've had a chance to review everything thoroughly. Understood, Becca replied, her voice steady. Is there anything else you need? No, that will be all for now, I said, dismissing her with a nod. As Becca left, I was left alone with the damning evidence. I needed to be careful in how I approached this. I spent the next few hours strategizing. I reviewed every piece of evidence, cross-referencing it with internal documents and financial records. Each finding added to the growing mountain of proof against Cassandra. The truth was that I had always hated Cassandra for constantly lying just to make herself look good for the sake of making me an outcast. She lied to Alexander about how she saved him when we were young. She lied about me sleeping with another man. She accused my son of lying, and now this. You're making things easy for me, Cassie, I uttered as I smirked. Now, it made sense why she didn't want me to be the CEO. Just when I found out about Cassandra's dirty baggage, I also tried to look into Alexander's records. I could not try any of them, so I worked hard to know the depth of their corruption in the company. In the end, I discovered irregularities in the financial reports related to the recent merger project. It looks like Alexander has been involved in some serious misconduct, embezzling assets and land. Chapter 11. That day, I had an important meeting. It was a meeting between me and a person who was there in the shadows of my life, but was never really a close one. Grayson Hale, the CEO of Titan Construction and Engineering. Grayson Hale strode into the room with a confident, almost effortless grace. Tall and impeccably dressed in a dark suit that spoke of both authority and style, he exuded the kind of presence that commanded attention. The last time we'd spoken was years ago at business school. No, our last interaction was when he saved me at Nirvana Club, and our interactions had been sparse since. Despite the rivalry between our companies, I couldn't deny the unspoken tension that crackled in the air when he walked in. "Miss Collins," Grayson greeted, his voice smooth and measured. "Thank you for meeting with me today." "Mr. Hale," I replied, offering a nod. "Let's get to the point. What brings you here?" Grayson took a seat opposite me, his gaze steady. "We've encountered some issues with the construction of your new resort. Titan Construction and Engineering is handling the project, as you know, and we've come across some significant financial discrepancies." My interest was piqued. I leaned forward, my hands clasped together. "Discrepancies? Can you elaborate?" He slid a folder across the table toward me. "We've discovered unusually large sums of money being tunneled out of the project's budget. The discrepancies are not just minor errors. They appear to have been deliberately signed off by someone high up on your end." "On our end? Damn it. What the hell did Alexander do when he was still the CEO?" I opened the folder and scanned the documents inside. The numbers were glaring, anomalies that screamed for attention. Each discrepancy seemed meticulously calculated, pointing to a deeper issue. "I see," I said, closing the folder with a sigh. "And you believe Alexander is behind this, yes?" Grayson nodded. "Yes. The signatures on the approval documents match his. I thought it was important for you to know, given the gravity of the situation." I ran a hand through my hair, feeling a mix of frustration and annoyance. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll need to investigate further." Grayson's eyes met mine, and for a moment, the usual tension between us softened. "I understand this must be a difficult situation. If there's anything more I can assist with, please let me know." "Actually," I began, a thought forming, "I could use your insight. We're going to need a thorough audit of the entire project's financials. If you have any recommendations or connections that might help, I'd appreciate your input." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I'll see what I can do. The financial irregularities are troubling, and it's in our mutual interest to ensure everything is transparent and above board." The conversation deepened, but I couldn't help but notice the subtle undercurrent of professionalism mixed with a hint of something else, something I could not explain. As Grayson prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Miss Collins," he said, looking back at me, "I hope you know that despite our companies being rivals, my offer to assist is genuine." "Thank you, Mr. Hale," I replied, appreciating the sentiment. "I'll keep that in mind." Chapter 12. The financial discrepancies, fraudulent transactions, and unauthorized asset transfers. They were all laid bare in front of me, damning evidence of the corruption that had seeped into every corner of prestige hotels and resorts. It was hard to fathom how Alexander and Cassandra had orchestrated such a thing. I leaned back in my chair. The revelation that Alexander, my ex-husband, and Cassandra, my sister, had engaged in such elaborate schemes left me reeling. How could they have stooped so low? The betrayal cut deeper than I had imagined possible. Alexander, not only did he neglect my son to death, but he also cheated even though we were married in the eyes of many. And now, he dared to mess with the company my parents left me. But I was angrier at Cassandra for doing this at the company that our parents worked hard to maintain. She had everything already, so why would she resort to stealing? My mind drifted back to those earlier days when I had been consumed by grief over Lucas's deteriorating health because of his brain cancer. I had focused on finding ways to save him, never suspecting that while I was lost in my sorrow, they were already ruining the company.
God.
If only I knew. A knock on the door jolted me from my thoughts. It was Grayson, his expression serious. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Natalie," he began, his voice measured. After a few meetings with him after the last time, he was now comfortable enough to call me by my name. "I've received the updates on the evidence and the case. What are you planning to do now?" I gestured to the documents spread across my desk. "I've reviewed everything. The extent of their actions is more extensive than I initially thought." Grayson nodded, his eyes scanning the papers. "That's fucked up. I still can't believe they went this far," I said, shaking my head. "Alexander was always calculating, but this? It's beyond anything I imagined. He already had Gourmet Ventures International. Who would have thought he was that greedy for money? And Cassandra, how could she be a part of this?" She knew what she was doing was wrong. The room fell into a contemplative silence. The weight of the upcoming legal battle loomed large, but I felt a grim determination settling within me. "I've decided to take legal action," I said firmly. "With the evidence and testimony we have, it's clear that Alexander and Cassandra need to answer for their crimes. They manipulated and betrayed me, assuming I would never find out or care." Grayson gave a nod of approval. "I'm fully behind you on this. The case should be filed as soon as possible. I can help coordinate with my legal team to ensure everything is airtight." I took a deep breath, the reality of the situation settling in. "Thank you, Grayson. I appreciate your support, but I have a legal team supporting me as well." He offered a reassuring smile. "Then let us assist your legal team." My lips pursed as I eyed him. "Fine." Upon hearing my approval, Grayson nodded once more. "Consider it done." Chapter 13. The knock on my office door was sharp and insistent. I looked up from the stack of documents, my pulse quickening. Alexander and Cassandra had arrived. No doubt they had heard about the legal case I had filed against them. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the confrontation. "Come in," I called, trying to sound composed. The door swung open, and they stepped inside. Alexander's face was a storm of anger and frustration, while Cassandra's eyes blazed with a fierce intensity. They looked like they had come to settle a score, and I was ready to face them head-on. "Natalie," Alexander began, his voice clipped with fury, "we need to talk about this ridiculous lawsuit." "What the fuck is that?" Meanwhile, Cassandra didn't wait for Alexander to finish. She stormed forward, her voice rising with each word. "What the heck is wrong with you, Natalie? This is all about your jealousy, isn't it? You just want Alexander's attention. That's why you're doing this. Now that your son is dead, you can't use anyone to get him back, do you?" I stood my ground, feeling the anger simmering inside me. "Jealousy? Is that what you think this is about? Cassandra, you've lied about everything. You've deceived Alexander and everyone around you. You made him believe that you were his savior when he was young and running from those kidnappers. You've twisted the truth to suit your narrative. Why don't we ask our parents? They set me up in an arranged marriage with Alexander because they knew I was the one who saved him. But is that even important now?" Cassandra's face turned a shade redder. How dare you bring that up? That was years ago, and you're just bitter." "And what about the lies you told about me?" I shot back. "You claimed I was pretending Lucas was ill just to manipulate Alexander.
How could you?"
You ensured he was absent whenever Lucas needed him, and you played him like a puppet. You even made sure you always had something urgent to do whenever I called Alexander for the sake of my son." Cassandra's eyes widened with shock, but there was no remorse in them. She had always been adept at spinning stories, but now her facade was cracking under the weight of the truth. My eyes shifted from Cassie to my ex-husband, who seemed shocked that Cassandra somehow admitted her lies. "And what about you, Alexander?" I demanded, turning my gaze to him. "Did you confirm that Lucas is your son now? I'm sure the DNAist won't lie." At that point, Alexander's face was a mask of conflicting emotions. Anger, guilt, and something I couldn't quite place flickered in his eyes. I'm sorry. I step closer, my voice cold and steady.
Funny.
Now you are sorry? You've turned a blind eye to your responsibilities, allowed Cassandra to manipulate you, and engaged in corrupt practices at the company. You even believed Cassandra when she told you I slept with another man. You let her make you believe that Lucas was not your son. How does it feel now, knowing that no one is pestering you to play with him or constantly calling you, asking for your attention? Alexander flinched at my words, but he didn't respond. The weight of his actions was beginning to bear down on him, though he tried to maintain his composure. Meanwhile, Cassandra's voice trembled with rage. You're going to regret everything, bitch. I smirked. You're the one who will regret everything, Cassandra. I know you've been jealous of me since we were young, but you stoop so low. I can step on you with my feet. That low. Chapter 14. Their faces were masks of anger and disbelief, but it was Alexander who looked on the brink of exploding. His eyes shifted to Cassandra, a flicker of realization crossing his face. Is this true? He demanded, his voice trembling. Did you lie to me about everything? At that moment, Cassandra's composure cracked, and she looked cornered. It's not like that, Alexander. I only did what I thought was necessary. No, Alexander roared, his voice echoing off the walls. It's not necessary. It's deceit. The lies you told about saving me, about keeping Natalie and Lucas away from me. Alexander, calm down. Cassandra tried to interject, but he was beyond reason. Calm down, Alexander snapped. Do you understand what you've done? You made me believe Natalie was at fault, that she was the problem when it was you all along. You've poisoned our lives with your lies. It was ridiculous. He was blaming it all on Cassandra when in the first place, it was his choice to believe him. I had always told him the truth, yet he never listened. And now he was blaming everything on someone else. Cassandra's face fell, and she tried to explain, but her words were lost in Alexander's growing fury. You've been deceiving me all this time. You kept me away from Lucas when he needed me the most. You let me believe that everything was Natalie's fault. And for what? For your own gain. Now he cared about my son? I wanted to laugh just to mock them. The realization seemed to hit Alexander with the force of a freight train. His anger gave way to anguish, and he sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. The facade of control he had maintained for so long shattered, and I watched as tears streamed down his face. I was wrong, he sobbed, his voice breaking. I see it now. I see how I failed Lucas, how I failed you. I was so blind, so consumed by my own damn feelings and Cassandra's lies. I should have been there for him. I should have been there for you. His cries were heart-wrenching, but I felt nothing. Alexander, it's too late for apologies. Lucas is gone. The damage you've done is irreparable. Alexander looked up, his eyes swollen and red. I know, he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. I can never undo the hurt I've caused. I can never bring Lucas back. I just want to beg for forgiveness, for everything I've done. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for not being there, for believing the lies, for everything. He fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he reached out toward me, his voice desperate. Please, Natalie, forgive me. I was wrong about everything. I failed him. I failed you. I'm begging you. I need to make this right, even if I can't bring him back. The sight of him, broken and begging, was almost too much to bear. It made my blood boil in anger. The man who had once been my husband and whom I had once loved was now reduced to a shadow of his former self, consumed by regret and sorrow. But despite everything, I knew that forgiveness was not something I could easily give. Forgiveness, I uttered, my voice cold. How can I forgive you when you had every chance to make things right and chose to believe in lies instead? You'll have to live with the consequences of your actions, just as I have to live with the loss of Lucas. Years have passed since then. Cassandra served years in prison, and after that, she left the country and begged our parents for a second chance. Alexander also served his sentence in prison, and I hadn't heard about him since then. Grayson and I were dining at a restaurant that had become a favorite of ours. The atmosphere was warm, and the soft hum of conversations filled the air. I was enjoying the moment, savoring the peace I had fought so hard to achieve until I saw someone from a distance. Alexander stood by the entrance. His eyes landed on me. He looked older. The sparks on his eyes were gone, and he lost weight. His gaze met mine, and I could see the regret etched deeply into his features. Meanwhile, Grayson noticed my distraction and followed my gaze. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his hand squeezing mine gently. "Yeah," I replied softly, trying to keep my composure. "It's just Alexander." Grayson's eyes flicked toward Alexander, who was now walking toward us, his steps heavy with the burden of his past. "Hello, Natalie," Alexander said, his voice carrying a note of solemnity. "Grayson." Grayson nodded curtly, his expression guarded. "Alexander." The three of us stood in an uneasy silence. Alexander finally broke the silence. "I wanted to see you, Natalie. To say, I'm sorry for everything, for the pain I caused. I've had time to reflect, and I know I can't undo the past, but I needed to say this." I looked at him, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes, but I didn't say anything. Even after years, I still couldn't feel anything towards him. Alexander bit his lower lip, accepting the fact that I would never talk to him again. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I regret everything and wish you happiness. And if there's a chance, if you find yourself forgiving me, maybe Grayson's hand tightened around mine, a silent reassurance. "We're getting married, man," he said quietly, his voice firm. Upon hearing that, Alexander looked at us both, his eyes widening in shock. I see. I wish you both the best," he said before turning to leave. The past was now behind me, and with Grayson by my side, I was ready to embrace the future we had ahead of us. Suddenly, I felt my fiancé's breath near my cheeks. "Damn, you're a heartbreaker," he whispered. I chuckled upon hearing what he said. "Don't worry, I won't break your heart."